source elements.
Hey everyone, my name is Vincent. This is Robert, our co-founder. We're here today to talk to you about RTS and RTL. RTS is our sync, is for syncing two timelines together. Basically what RTS does is it's a feature in Source Connect that allows you to sync two timelines together, either between a DAW and another DAW, or a DAW and something like RTL. So let's talk a little bit about what these things are. RTS is Source Connect's built-in DAW timeline synchronization system. RTS is operated via a panel in Source Connect and uses Rewire, a common protocol for sync found in most DAWs. RTS makes ADR, overdub, and remote review workflows possible with Source Connect. It provides both transport control and timeline sync. RTL, Remote Timeline, is a small add-on application that can take the place of a DAW on the remote connection, thus making setup easier for the talent or reviewer side of the connection.
So how does RTS work? First, the SE Rewire component or plugin is required to be present in the DAW at each side of the connection. This is achieved in different ways with different DAWs, but often it's a plugin, as is the case with Pro Tools, or an instrument plugin, as with Cubase. Then, depending on the workflow, one side of the connection clicks on the RTS send button in the RTS panel, and the other one clicks on the RTS receive button in the RTS panel in Source Connect. The timelines at each side must have the same setup in terms of the sample rate, the tempo map if there is one, the song start, and the time code settings, frame rates, and of course the content in the timeline like your video and other audio. If RTS review mode is used, then the RTS send side of the connection has to use Source Connect Pro, as Source Connect Standard isn't capable of sending RTS review play commands. But the receive side of that connection can use Source Connect Standard to receive RTS review play commands. All right, so there's two modes in RTS. There's overdub mode and review mode. Use overdub mode to record a take, ADR, or overdubbing when there's no engineer on the talent side of the connection, or it's better to have the director side of the connection control the transport. You would use the review mode to review a playback of a take or to review an entire mix to a director and stakeholders. The RTS sender always controls the timeline of the RTS receiver. One thing to note is it's not possible to have both sides in sync at the same time. One side has to chase the other or be in sync with the other. Therefore, content from one side of the connection will arrive in sync to the other side, but then the content going the other direction, if there is content going the other direction, will be delayed and be out of sync. So sync is only in one direction or the other. So depending on where the RTS sender presses play, it determines the direction of the sync. When the RTS sender presses play in their DAW, then the RTS receiver chases the RTS sender, and that's what we call review mode. When the RTS sender presses play in Source Connect, then the RTS sender chases the RTS receiver, and that is overdub mode, and that's what we'll talk about here. So we have a graphic that kind of shows the signal flow of RTS. Here, the sender would press play in the RTS panel of Source Connect, and the play command will flow over to the RTS receiver on the remote side on the right side, and then when their system goes into play, the audio from them will flow back to the sender. That's the blue line with the arrows going to the left, and therefore the audio received on the sender side will be from the remote side, but it'll be in sync at the sender's side. So we can show this to you in an example here. One moment. So the setup in the DAW is anytime a DAW is not, the setup for Source Connect in the DAW is as follows. Over here on my Pro Tools, we're using Pro Tools as an example here, but like I said, any Rewire compatible DAW can be used. Down here I have a track that I just call Rewire, and in it I have the instrument plugin Rewire set up. And so that's all that's necessary to bring up the Rewire or the RTS compatibility with Source Connect. So then I make my connection, as is the case here with Vincent, and I just have to click on the send button in Source Connect, and now that puts me in control. On Vincent's side, he would, on his connection, click on the receive. So Vincent, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent. All right. So Vincent, if you go ahead and click on the receive of your Source Connect, we're already connected. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you mute the local?
Oh, yes. Sorry about that. Wrong track was armed. All right. So if you go ahead and click on receive on your side, we can do a ADR take.
All right, I'm ready. And you guys should be seeing my screen now.
All right. So here I already have Vincent's track armed to record. And I'm just going to arm my transport to record, and then I'm going to initiate play in the Source Connect panel. And here we go, Vincent.
Signore Maestro.
Excellent. So there we just recorded a take. I controlled the transport. Vincent saw that, heard his beeps, and did his performance. And that was all through Pro Tools on Vincent's side. But the reality is that Vincent doesn't need to be using Pro Tools. So in this case, we can use the RTL application. So RTL, anytime a DAW is not available on the talent side, or it's too complex to use, RTL or remote timeline is a really good solution. The first thing you want to do is you want to convert the video that you're using to H.264, and then you can burn into that video any beeps and any wipes that you might need to cue the talent, and as well as the scratch track as well. And you can drop the scratch track out at any point where the talent is replacing a line. And then you're going to launch on your side the Rtl Creator. You're going to drag this video into the Rtl Creator, and you're going to assign it the same time code that your video sits at in your Pro Tools or your DAW timeline. At that point, you can decide if you're going to watermark it, you can put a password on it, and then you click the Create button to actually create the file. So here we can show you how that goes over here. So right here is the Rtl Creator Application, and I've already bounced down my H.264 video, and so that is right here, and I'm just going to drag that over here, and then I can give it the timecode location, and then I can click on Create, give it a name. It's going to ask me to set a password, and we create the file. So now it's rendering the file. And once it's rendered, we can transfer that over to the talent using whatever you're using, Dropbox or WeTransfer, or just whatever transfer method you'd like to use to send them the file. At that point, the talent receives that file and they can open it up. So Vincent, if you want to show how that file is opened up, go ahead.
All right, so I already have the ADR player open here. So all I have to do is go ahead and select the timeline from that folder and then drag it over to the RTL player and enter the password. So Robert, it looks like because I was just in Pro Tools, it's still seeing Rewire even though I just closed Pro Tools. So
yeah, make sure Pro Tools is quit. This is basically you can only have one Rewire app at a time open. So we were previously just using Pro Tools, and so it's still also make sure that you deselect Receive in Source Connect, and then quit Pro Tools and go ahead and open it. Obviously, in an actual use case, you'd be using either Pro Tools or RTL, but you wouldn't be switching between these things. All right. So other things I'm trying to think of it while Vincent is setting that up. In my timeline, I have my beeps located here, but those beeps are also in, like these are just for my queuing as well, so I know where they are. But Vincent has those coming out of his RTL player, which you will see in a second. Let's give us one moment here.
All right, Robert. Sorry about that. I am back. So the next thing I have to do, I got my timeline all set up. I hit receive and source connect in the RTS panel. Now I'm just going to change my output in the RTL player to my interface output and make sure the sound's coming through. And I'm ready to go.
All right, so now to do a take, it's the exact same thing. I'm just going to arm my transport to record, and then I already have Vincent's track to record, and I'm going to initiate play through Source Connect. So here we go, Vincent.
Signore Maestro.
Awesome. So there is a take. Now, one of the nice features in Source Connect is the review mode that we spoke about earlier. So here we've maybe done a whole series of takes and we want to play some stuff back and make sure that Vincent's happy with his performance. And that's pretty easy to do. Here I'm just going to take this take and I'm going to copy it down to a playback track. And then I'm going to play it back for Vincent. And instead of pressing play in Source Connect, I'm just going to press play in the DAW. And you're going to notice that instead of seeing this big loop of the red line going all the way back to send, it's just going to have a single line going straight from send to receive. And therefore, Vincent's going to hear that playback in sync on his system. So Vincent, check it out.
Signore Maestro. Sounds pretty good.
And there you go. So review is pretty useful for a lot of things. Here's a screenshot that shows the signal flow of review, of the review mode in RTS. Essentially what's happening is that, again, you're pressing play in the DAW workstation, and then the play command goes all the way through to the receiver side. But the audio from the DAW also goes through, and those are the blue arrows on the top showing the arrows going to the right. So when that audio is received, it's received at the receiver side in sync. They're reviewing what you're playing to them in sync. This mode has been used a lot for doing traditional ADR, even pre-pandemic, where you would often have a talent at the same studio with an engineer. So now you have an engineer on both sides, and maybe the transport and everything is being run from the talent side of the connection. Traditionally, this was done using sending timecode down one channel of a connection and maybe only one mic down the other. But the beauty of RTS is that you can actually have sync and you can still have a stereo connection. So you can send, in cases for ADR, a boom and a lav at the same time. This can be recorded on the remote side, and then using the Cue Manager, the remote or the auto restore and auto replace feature, the whole session doesn't even have to be sent back. So here we're going to do an example where now Vincent is no longer supposedly on the remote side, but Vincent is now on the local side, and we are at the same studio. So I'm going to switch Vincent over to my local record track. And here it's a stereo record, so I have two mics from Vincent. I'm getting rid of some things. We have two mics from Vincent recording that. And now we're just going to run a session as normal. The beeps are heard directly from me for Vincent, and then I can just do a take as normal recording in Pro Tools. And when I hit play and record in Pro Tools, the sync will go straight across from send to receive. They will chase, and they will therefore hear in review in real time the take that's being recorded. Vincent, are you all ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go.
Signore Maestro.
And there we go. Perfect. So, review mode can be used not just for reviewing takes after an ADR recording, but it can also be used to review an entire mix. And so the setup for that would be as follows. The mix side of the connection will be using RTS, and they'll be the sender, so they'll need Source Connect Pro for that. And the remote side, the director side, will need the video in their DAW timeline, or if they're using remote timeline, they will just need to have the remote timeline file from you. And they'll be the RTS receiver. Talkback can be done in a few ways. It can be inbound through Source Connect, or you can use an on-the-side communication system such as a phone call or a web meeting room. But you do need to make or take care that echo is minimized, especially with Source Connect, because it doesn't have echo cancellation built in. It wants to transmit very pure audio. So if you're going through Source Connect, you need to have a push-to-talk button for the director, either a microphone with a switch, or if they are using Pro Tools, they can use our Source Talkback plugin, which is very useful. The other thing is you can review, obviously, in surround sound using Source Connect Pro X. And in fact, if you do a review with a multi-connect of Source Connect Pro X, so 2 7-1 connections, you can actually do Atmos review in real time. So in my setup here, what I would, I just have to change a few things essentially to do a review. One is that I'm going to send my entire mix over to Source Connect. So here's my mix fader. I'm just going to unmute that send going to Source Connect, and then my talkback is already going to Source Connect. So that's all I need to do. And then whatever I play back for the So we have some best practices, of course. Excuse me. We have what we call an RTS checklist. You can find it on our website. It's also available if you just Google for RTS checklist, source elements, or Source Connect, you'll find it. In particular, you want to make sure that the song start is at 0 on the timeline. So bar 1, beat 1 needs to be the very top of the DAW timeline. The other thing that you want to make sure of, and this is very important, even though these are sort of MIDI and music type settings, you want to make sure that the tempos match. It has to be either a static tempo, or if you're using a tempo map, the tempo maps have to match. In Pro Tools, the tempo defaults to 120. If you're using you can turn off your conductor, so you just have a static tempo, or you can just make sure that you have a single tempo setting in your timeline. You obviously want to match your timecode settings on the two timelines, and you want to have, if you are using timecode offsets, that's fine, but you have to have the same timecode offset on both your DAWs on both sides of the system, of the connection. But you should note that if you are using timecode offsets, the timecode numbers reflected in Source Connect won't be offset, so they might not match, and therefore it's maybe better not to use timecode offsets and just place the content in the timeline where it really is instead of offsetting to that timeline. The next thing is, in Pro Tools in particular, you can kind of optimize the performance of RTS. In your playback hardware settings, the hardware buffer, the playback engine hardware buffer, the lower the playback engine buffer, hardware buffer, the tighter the RTS sync resolution is. The downside of that is that as you lower that hardware buffer, plugins and like may become unstable depending on how beefy your system is. So we recommend 256 at least for a hardware buffer. 512 or 1024 should also be fine, but generally 256 and 512 are great settings. The other thing is that there's in the RTS panel, there's a send and receive delay that can be used to fine tune the settings or the sync, because sometimes depending on latency going through the DAW in the DAW mixer or whatever routing is going on, you might need to slightly adjust. And so there's a send and receive delay at the bottom of Source Connect. But the one thing to note is that that is not available if you're using the Link plugin, because that is automatically calculated for you in that case. So that's all we have.
So now we're just going to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions, please let us know. I apologize. I'm seeing now that someone said I was a little hard to hear. I don't know at what point that was.
Yeah, I think I had the volume all the way up.
No, we're good now. Okay. We're fine now. It doesn't seem like we have any questions at the moment. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask?
We were that clear.
I guess we were very clear. All right. So, Robert, really quick, do you want to go ahead and show that timecode offset?
Sure. So in Pro Tools, the timecode offset is here in your session setup window. And I'll try to show you an example here. So if right now I'm all zeros. So when I press play in Pro Tools, you notice that my 330 matches down here 330. But if I put an offset in Pro Tools here, say if I put like a 1 hour offset, enable to maintain relative, yes. So now if I hit play in Pro Tools is at 1 hour, but the RTS panel is at 0. And that's not so bad if you do whole hour offsets. You can just sort of ignore the last number. But if you do half hour or other types of offsets that are not whole hours, that can get confusing. The point is that RTS is syncing the timeline. It's not syncing timecode specifically. It's syncing from the beginning of the timeline to the end of the timeline. And what you call that timecode within that timeline, that's up to Pro Tools. So RTS still keeps it in sync, even though maybe the numbers you're looking at are different.
And can you talk a little bit about the send and receive delay that we were talking about before?
Sure. So put this back, maintain relative. So depending on how you're routing audio to and from Source Connect, it's possible that there's some extra latency, or if you're not using delay compensation, maybe because you have a talent on microphone and you don't want them to hear that delay. For whatever reason, if you need to fine-tune the sync, there's a send and delay setting at the bottom of the RTS panel in Source Connect Pro. And you can put positive or negative numbers in here. This defaults to 80. We found that to be a pretty good setting. But in your system, it might indeed be 0 sometimes even. So this is just a general setting that works well, but you want to double check it and make sure that you're, with any system, you want to calibrate your sync to make sure that you're right in sync. And that's where you can fine tune it in RTS.
Is there anything else you want to show? Actually, really quick, could you just mute those, the send and receive, so we don't get anything coming back?
There we go.
Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to show?
I really can't think of anything else. Our RTS really is that simple. Once it's set up with the rewire plugin in each workstation, or inherently it's part of the remote transport or the RTL program, it's really as simple as making sure that you are using the right play command for the desired sync direction. So just to reiterate, probably one of the biggest things is the sender of RTS always controls the timeline of the receiver, but depending on where the sender presses play, that's what determines the sync direction. So if the sender presses play in their DAW, then the receiver chases the sender. If the sender presses play in the RTS panel of Source Connect, then the sender chases the receiver instead. So I think that's everything we have.
All right. Is there any questions? Does anyone have any questions here? I guess not. I'm not seeing anything pop up so far. We're always here to help. We're always happy to answer any questions you might have. Feel free to reach out to our wonderful support team. You can reach them by email at support@source-elements.com. They're able to help you with anything you might need.
The solutions team's also happy to help with other setups if you have very specific questions and whatnot. We're also here to help out.
Yep, and I guess that's it. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you very much.
We do have a question.
Oh.
Recapping. When the file returns to the post house from the talent, is it synced?
When the file returns from the post house. So
the audio
returns from the post house. So if
the post house from the talent.
There's the post house is recording the talent directly. There's no file to return.
They're referring to audio.
Right. So I'm recording the talent directly.
Yeah. So that audio. How is that audio in sync? Is the question.
Because Source Connect is chasing the talent and capturing it in the post house's DAW in real time, right on the timeline. So it's in sync the moment you record it. There's no need for the talent to send a file. The queue system can send any missing data and make sure that file is 100% perfect. But really, with RTS, if the post house is recording the talent, there's no files to send after the fact. The post house has captured everything.
Okay, so let's go back to, I believe it is this slide. Yep, this is the overdub mode slide.
Sure.
Showing that workflow.
Right. So that's where the arrows are going to the left. The play command sends essentially what happens is the play button is pressed in the RTS panel of Source Connect, and that puts the talent into play first. The talent sees the picture, performs against the picture. The audio in the blue with the arrows going to the left, the talent performs that audio. It goes back to the post house. At that point, the post house goes into record and chases the talent, and it gets captured into the post house's DAW in perfect sync in real time.
All right, and I think that answers that. Awesome. Thank you so much for your question, Nathan. Does anyone have anything else to add or ask? Guess not. Well, thank you once again. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. It was great to be here.
Thank you.
And great to show you guys all this. All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Source Elements.